What is one ethical red flag that should make an instructional designer pause before using or publishing AI generated content?
So again, some really great questions in this in this. So you have to bear with me on this one. If you produce something and an accountable human, so a person that's part of the process, can't explain, verify, or defend that content, a red flag should go up, right? And I did this kind of, I flipped it the other way because when I work with students, a lot of times to make an assessment a little more AI resistant, you have them present, right? Because then they have to defend something that they did. And if they use AI, you can tell pretty quickly that they don't have the depth of because they didn't go through the cognitive effort to produce that product. So you can tell right away. So that's exactly, if you can get that response where no one can go, oh, I can explain that, or I can verify it, or I can defend it. You probably have some problems because you don't have the human in the loop anymore, right? You let the tool just produce something that no one can defend or verify or explain. So you might have a problem there. That's when I would say, the red flag should pop up and be like, okay, we need to look at this.
Right. And pause and not move forward until you do that. Right.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Right. So important to just take a pause for a moment. Absolutely. So, Dwayne, as we close out this mini series, I can't believe how fast this went, but I'd love to bring the conversation back to what educators and instructional designers can take forward with them. What final advice would you give to an instructional designer or educator who wants to use AI responsibly while continuing to design meaningful learning experiences?
Yeah, and that's important, right? Because there's a ton of like trainings and stuff you can go to, but until you actually sit down and try to use it, you don't. I don't think you get a full appreciation. So my advice is pick a low risk use or low risk task, right? One that you have the domain knowledge to judge and evaluate against whatever the system can produce, and ask it to do a lot of the instructional design tasks that you would normally do. And don't judge what it produces based upon like amount. That's not a good metric there. What's a good metric is what does it produce that's accurate, that allows for an educationally meaningful process, right? So it's not just the volume that it produces, because these things can produce volumes, right? But did it produce stuff that works to produce a meaningful educational experience, and use that as a metrics to judge what it produced? Again, thinking in an instructional design context as we go through this. So really low risk task. Again, one that you're very familiar, the knowledge, it, right? So that you can actually judge what it produces. And I think you'll see, if you run that, I think you'll see some of the nuances of these tools, and you'll start to understand some of the limitations and boundaries that these may be producing, especially within our instructional design context. And I think that'll help you think through as you get into actually production and using these tools in your instructional design process.
I love that. Yeah, the low stakes. Start with something that you're familiar with. I like that because then you're not getting into something risky or an unknown, right? Early on, and then you can build up your expertise and your knowledge in this area. That's like you said, it's the wild, wild west, and we're still navigating it. Yes,
And when you do this too, know your organizational policy.
right.
If you don't know if there's one, ask, right? And know what it says and know what it means, right? It's one thing to read it, but it's one thing to know what that actually means in practice, right? So that you know the boundaries of what the policy, your organizational policy is, so you're not in violation. Because different organizations have different levels of risk. Some it's open and some they have a little more restrictive. So you want to make sure you understand that organization you're working for's policy on AI use. And they may have some very specific things on attribution, like we talked about before, right? So make sure that you're following those policy that they have laid out.